Good morning. My name is David Lepofsky. I'm the chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. I'm also a visiting professor at the Osgoode Hall Law School. I'm sorry I can't be at your event this morning. I really wish I could be, but I'm delighted to be given the task of trying to be provocative on video for 5 minutes to try to spark the conversation that's going to follow. So here goes, Provocative 101. Folks with disabilities face the absurd reality that we live in a world that was designed as if we're not there. And I'm talking about people with all kinds of disabilities, whether it's a physical disability, a mental disability, a sensory disability, communication disability, neurological, it doesn't matter what it is. Those who design our buildings and their interiors, those who write our laws, those who operate our schools, operate and design our public transit systems, even the retail stores we shop in and the products we buy there have for too many years been designed as if we're not there. And then when we try to fit in or use those products or benefit from those schools or whatever it may be, we end up having to try to shoehorn ourselves into a world that was that should have been designed to include us in the first place. And that's not because people are bad and don't want us there. It's because this has been an expectation for too many years. Now, people are trying to change that, and that's good. And our laws are trying to change that, and that's good. And I've been involved for years as a community volunteer organizer and activist to try to promote that. The problem is we're not doing it fast enough. Commendably, the Ontario legislature passed a law that we fought for a decade, passed it back in 2005, called the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It requires us to reach full accessibility by 2025 and requires the Ontario government to lead us there through passing a series of regulations called accessibility standards to ensure that we get there, to tell organizations what they got to do and when. And the government's also supposed to effectively enforce those regulations. Problem is, we're 8 years out from that deadline. We are behind schedule, and we're getting further behind every day. The government hasn't passed all the accessibility standards we need, and Ontario government's not effectively enforcing it the way they should. Let me talk about design, since many of you folks are from the design world. The fact is, we don't have good built environment design standards in Ontario. You can build a building to comply with our building code to the letter, and yet it can have significant accessibility problems. You can try to comply with the limited built environment requirements that have been enacted in standards under the Disabilities Act. And again, you may think you've done a great job because you've done everything the province told you to do, and yet you could fall miles short. In fact, just in the area of the built environment, let me just talk about that for a minute. We've pointed out in the media and on Twitter significant accessibility blunders in very new buildings, whether it's the brand new Women's College Hospital here in the center of Toronto, or the new Students Learning Center at Ryerson, or even at the law school where I teach, the Osgoode Hall Law School. We had a building there which, when I studied there 40 years ago, was something that was not great for people in wheelchairs, but for blind folks, it was something I could learn as a blind individual within a couple hours and could bomb around with no problems. Now, 40 years later, they've done a major renovation. Yeah, they did improve wheelchair accessibility, and that's good, but they've converted it into one of the worst environments I've tried to navigate in years. It's hard to be that bad. And this was designed by leading architects. The Student Learning Center in downtown Toronto has a number of accessibility blunders, and we've also detected a bunch of new ones at the brand new Culinary Arts Center that's just opened at Centennial College, just at the northeast end of Toronto. These are all very public buildings built with very public money, and yet we run into these problems. Well, why is that? It's for a couple of reasons. The first is our law lets organizations get away with it. The only law we could enforce, and it does apply, would be the Human Rights Code. But to file a human rights complaint against these universities because of the blunders in the design of these buildings is a battle that a lot of people with disabilities just don't want to take on. And also because those who design these buildings think that as long as they comply with the building code, they've done all they got to do. Regrettable that they don't seem to be aware, or aren't aware enough, that they also have to ensure that they live up to the requirements of accessibility in the Ontario Human Rights Code. And in the case of the government organizations, similar requirements of the Charter of Rights. Let me take just a moment or two to focus specifically on the area of education. You notice a couple of the examples I just gave you were buildings in our education system. We have an education system, whether preschools, schools, colleges, or universities in the province of Ontario, which is full of accessibility barriers. Some of them are physical barriers, like the ones I've described. Some are technology barriers. Some are attitude barriers. There are curriculum barriers. There's a wide range of barriers. And this hurts a lot of people. In Ontario's publicly funded schools, Catholic and secular, there are 334,000 students with special education needs who have to run up against these barriers. It's because our school system, like our society, was designed as if we're not there. Why the Toronto District School Board, at the start of this current year, 2005, has 550 schools, but reports that at the start of the year, only 85 of them had wheelchair accessibility. Now, wheelchair accessibility is only one test, but it's an important one. So, what do we do about it? Well, what we need to do is to get the Ontario government to pass a new regulation, an education accessibility standard under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It would tell schools, colleges, universities, and others what they need to do and when they need to do it by to get rid of these barriers. It would give them the clear guidance they need and that they're not getting from the law right now. It would save each organization having to reinvent the wheel, figuring out what they have to do, and it would save families of students with disabilities and the students themselves from having to fight barriers one at a time. And the government of Ontario is committed to the goal of more employment for people with disabilities, but you can't get a good job if you can't get a good education. So let me conclude with a couple of ways you can learn more about this. I'm very active on Twitter. If you want to learn more about this, take out your smartphones right now before the panel begins and follow at David Lepofsky, DavidLepofsky. You want to learn more about this? We have a webpage focusing just on this topic, aodaalliance.org/education. And if you want to get updates from the AODA Alliance to learn how you can do more on this, to get our new discussion paper on education accessibility and other tools that we're making available, send an email to an address I'll give you now, and all you got to say is sign me up. We'll know what to do. The email address to write is aodafeedback@gmail.com. aodafeedback@gmail.com. So I hope that's provocative enough. Have a great panel, and thanks for letting me speak to you on video.